literally start as a car drives by. Anyway, welcome back, guys. And we are currently reading Danny the Champion of the World. Wow, how many times do I have to say that wrong? This is by Roald, or how my dad pronounces it. Just kidding. He thought I was pronouncing it wrong, which made me really nervous. But I'm not. I'm saying the whole name, and he thought I was saying just the first name. This is illustrated by Quentin Blake, and we are currently on Chapter 5, The Secret Methods. This is on page 33. I don't know where you're at if you are on a digital, like an electronic, so sorry. We have a few pictures that I'll show you through this. Just kind of recap. We found out the dad's darkest secret, which was poaching, and that's about it. So they had like a heart-to-heart kind of last night, so. Oh, and we're still talking about it, I think. So we're starting on page 33 at the bottom. So this is Chapter 5, The Secret Methods. All the best ways of poaching pheasants were discovered by my old dad, my father said. My old dad studied poaching the way a scientist studies science. My father put my sandwiches on a plate and brought them over to my bunk. I put the plate on my lap and started eating. I was ravenous. Do you know, my old dad actually used to keep a flock of prime roosters in the backyard just to practice on. My father said, a rooster is very much like a pheasant, you see. They are equally stupid and they just like the same sorts of food. And they like the same sorts of foods. A rooster is a tamer, that's all. So whenever my dad thought of a new method of catching pheasants, he tried it out on the rooster first to see if it worked. What are the best ways? I asked. My father laid a half-eaten sandwich on the edge of the sink and gazed at me in silence for about 20 seconds. Promise you won't tell another soul? I promise. Now, here's the thing, he said. Here's the first big secret. Ah, but it's more than a secret, Danny. It's the most important discovery in the whole history of poaching. He edged a shade closer to me. He edged a shade closer to me. His face was pale in the pale yellow glow from the lamp in the ceiling, but his eyes were shining like stars. So here it is, he said, and now suddenly his voice became soft and whispery and very private. Pheasants, he whispered, are crazy about raisins. Is that the big secret? That's it, he said, and it may not sound very much when I say it like that, but believe me, it is. Raisins, I said. Just ordinary raisins. It's like mania with them. You throw a few raisins into a bunch of pheasants and they'll start fighting each other to get to them. My dad discovered that about 40 years ago just as he discovered these other things I'm about to describe to you. Here are the pheasants chasing the raisins. Kind of crazy. My father paused and glanced over his shoulder as though to make sure there was nobody at the door and caravan listening. Method number 1, he said softly, is known as the horsehair stopper. The horsehair stopper, I murmured. That's it, my father said, and the reason it's such a brilliant method is that it's completely silent. There's no squawking or flapping around or anything else with the horsehair stopper. When the pheasant is caught, and that's mighty important because don't forget, Danny, when you're up in those woods at night and the great trees are spreading their branches high above you like black ghosts, it is so silent you hear a mouse moving. You can hear a mouse moving, and somewhere among it all, the keepers are waiting and listening. They're always there, those keepers, standing stony still against a tree or behind a bush with their guns at the ready. What happens with the horsehair stopper? I asked. How does it work? It's very simple, he said. First you take a few raisins and you soak them in water overnight to make them plump and soft and juicy. Then you get a bit of good stiff horsehair and you cut it up into half-inch lengths. Horsehair, I said. Where did you get the horsehair? You pulled off a horsetail, of course. That's not as difficult. As long as you stand to one side when you're doing it so you don't get kicked. Go on, I said. So you cut the horsehair up into half-inch lengths. Then you push one of those lengths through the middle of a raisin. So there's just a tiny bit of horsehair sticking out of each side. That's all you do. You are now ready to catch a pheasant. If you want to catch more than one, you prepare more raisins. Then when evening comes, you creep up into the woods, making sure you get there before the pheasants have gone up into the trees to roost. Then you scatter the raisins, and soon along comes a pheasant and gobbles one up. What happens then? I asked. Here's what my dad discovered, he said. First of all, the horsehair makes this raisin stick in the pheasant's throat. It doesn't hurt him, it simply stays there and tickles. It's rather like having a crumb stuck in your own throat. But after that, believe it or not, the pheasant never moves his feet again. He becomes absolutely rooted to the spot, and here he stands, pumping his silly neck up and down just like a piston, and all you've got to do is nip it out quickly from the place where you're hiding and pick him up. Is that really true, Dad? I swear it, my father said. Once a pheasant's had the horsehair stopper, you can turn a hosepipe on him and he won't move. It's just one of the most unexplainable little things, but it takes a genius to discover it. My father paused, and there was a gleam of pride in his eyes as he dwelt for a moment upon the memory of his own dad, the great poaching inventor. So that's method number 1, he said. What's method number 2, I asked. He said, method number 2 is a real beauty. It's a flash of pure brilliance. I can even remember the day it was invented. I was just about the same age you are now, and it was a Sunday morning, and my dad comes into the kitchen holding a huge white rooster in his hands. I think I've got it, he says. There's a little smile in his face and a shine of glory in his eyes, and he comes in very soft and quick and puts the bird down right in the middle of the kitchen table. By golly, he says, I've got a good one this time. Here's the dad Danny's grandpa, pretty much, placing down the rooster on the table. A good what? My mom says, looking up from the sink. Horace, take that filthy bird off my table. The rooster has a funny little paper hat over his head like an ice cream cone upside down, and my dad is pointing to it proudly and saying, Stroke him, go on, stroke him. Do anything you like to him, he won't move an inch. The rooster starts scratching away at the paper hat with one of his feet, but the hat seems to be stuck on and won't come off. No bird in the world is going to run away once you cover up its eyes, my dad says, and he starts poking the rooster with his finger and pushing it around the table. The rooster doesn't take the slightest bit of notice. You can have this one, he says to Mom. You can have it and wring its neck and dish it up for dinner as a celebration of what I have just invented. And then straight away he takes me by my arm and marches me quickly out the door, and off we go over the fields and up into the big forest to the other side of Little Hampton, which used to belong to the Duke of Buckingham. And in less than 2 hours we get 5 lovely fat pheasants with no more trouble than it takes to go out and buy them in a shop. My father pauses for breath. His eyes are shining bright as they gaze back into the wonderful world of his youth. But, Dad, I said, how do you get the paper hats over the pheasants' heads? You'd never guess it, Danny. Tell me. Listen carefully, he says, glancing over his shoulder, as though he expected to see a keeper or even the Duke of Buckingham himself at the caravan door. Here's how you do it. First of all, you dig a little hole in the ground. Then you twist a piece of paper into the shape of a cone, and you fit this into the hollow end up, like a cup. Then you smear the inside of a paper cup with glue and drop in a few raisins. At the same time, you lay a trail of raisins along the ground leading up to it. Now, the old pheasant comes pecking along the trail, and then he gets to the hole and he pops his head inside to gobble up the raisins. And the next thing he knows, he's got the paper hat stuck over his eyes, and he can't see a thing. Isn't that just a fantastic idea, Danny? My dad called it the sticky hat. Is that the one you used this evening? I asked. My father nodded. How many did you get, Dad? Well, he said, looking a bit sheepish. Actually, I didn't get any. I arrived too late. By the time I got there, they were already going up to roost. That shows you how out of practice I am. Was it fun all the same? Marvelous, he said. Absolutely marvelous. Just like the old days. He undressed and put on his pajamas. Then he turned out the lamp in the ceiling and climbed into his bunk. Dad, I whispered. What is it? Have you been doing this often after I've gone to sleep without me knowing it? No, he said. Tonight was the first time for 9 years. When your mother died, I had to look after you by myself. I made a vow to keep up poaching until to give up poaching until you were old enough to be left alone at night. But this evening I broke my vow. I had such a tremendous longing to go up there into the woods again. I just couldn't stop myself. I am very sorry I did it. If you ever want to go again, I won't mind, I said. Do you mean that? He said, his voice rising in excitement. Do you really mean it? Yes, I said. So long as you tell me beforehand, you will promise to tell me beforehand if you're going, won't you? You're quite sure you won't mind? Quite sure. Good boy, he said, and we'll have roast pheasant for supper whenever you want it. It's miles better than chicken. And one day, Dad, will you take me with you? Ah, he said, I reckon you're just a bit young to be dodging around up there in the dark. I wouldn't want you to get peppered with a buckshot in the backside at your age. Your dad took you at my age, I said. There was a short silence. We'll see how it goes, my father said. But I'd like you to get back into practice before I make any promises. You understand? Yes, I said. I wouldn't want to take you with me until I'm right back in my old form. Oh. But I'd like to get back into practice before I make any promises. You understand? Yes, I said. I wouldn't want to take you with me until I'm right back into my old form. No, I said. Good night, Danny. Go to sleep now. Good night, Dad. That is the end of chapter 5 of Danny, the Champion of the World. It ended on page 43, so we will be starting back up on... It ended on page 41, and so we'll start up with chapter 6 on page 42. Again, that was Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald. I thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys for the next chapter or next book or whatever you're listening to from my channel. So, bye-bye for now.